Lenovo's popular Legion Pro 7i gaming laptop has been refreshed for 2026, and it's broken our records for best gaming performance thanks to Intel's refreshed 290HX Plus processor. But as far as I can tell, the CPU refresh is the only difference this year. So let's find out what difference that makes and see if the Pro 7i is still one of my top picks for 2026. The Legion is available in Eclipse Black or Glacier White finishes. I'll let you guess which one I've got. Build quality feels good with an aluminum lid and bottom panel. The interior is still plastic, but there's only a little flex even when pushing hard. There's RGB all over it, but if that's not your thing, you can turn it off or customize it. The front of the lid sticks out a bit, making it very easy to open, and the hinges feel nice and smooth. Fingerprints don't show up on the white finish, but I suspect long term it'll look dirtier than the black one. It's the same size as last year. It's definitely not a thin laptop, but it doesn't feel massive either. Many other 16-inch models we've tested with similar specs are chunkier. The laptop by itself weighs in at 5.8 pounds or 2.6 kilos, increasing to 8.5 pounds or 3.9 kilos with the large 400-watt charger included. It basically weighs the same as last year's version, and it's not too different compared to most of the other powerful 16-inch gaming laptops, but it becomes one of the heavier options once factoring in that huge 400-watt charger, with only Alienware's 16 Area 51 coming in heavier. My Pro 7i has Nvidia's RTX 5090 laptop GPU, Intel's latest 290HX Plus processor, 32 gigs of RAM, and a 16-inch OLED screen. But you can customize the specs quite a bit with the link below, and if it has a good sale, we'll list it on our GamingLaptop.deal's website so you can save money. The keyboard has per key RGB backlighting, and all keys and secondary functions get lit up. Holding the function key highlights the available shortcuts. There are 3 levels of key brightness with the function and up and down arrow keys, and you can swap through the first 6 lighting effects with the function and spacebar shortcut. These keyboard shortcuts control all RGB lighting together, not just the keyboard. The Legion Space software gives you more lighting customization, with 9 brightness levels and 13 different effects. You can drag the effects around here, and the function plus spacebar shortcut will cycle through the first 6. The included effects apply to the keyboard, front light bar, rear light bar, and lid logo together. But if you go to customize and make your own, you get much more granular control over everything. You can also use the function plus L shortcut to turn the lid logo lighting on or off at any time. The keyboard feels good to type with, just like other Legion keyboards. I appreciate that we're not stuck with tiny arrow keys like other laptops. You can also buy an optional keycap set for $25 when ordering, which lets you change the WASD caps to these other ceramic options. And there are spare switches in case you break them during removal, which I have done. The touchpad is plastic and works fine, but I'd like to see a glass option at this price point. We're testing Asus's Zephyrus at the same time, and it just feels much nicer to use. Port selection is decent, but I would have preferred a Type-C on either side, and it's annoying that the ports are so close to the front, despite there not being any air exhaust vents on the sides. Cables are just more likely to get in the way of your mouse hand. The display outputs offer a good mix for connecting to discrete or integrated graphics. Connecting to the DGPU provides VR support and better FPS in games, but connecting to the iGPU for lighter tasks means quieter fans. Getting inside requires removing 10 Phillips head screws. The 4 closest to the front are shorter than the rest. I still needed pry tools to open it. The ones I use are linked below. Once inside, you can't do much until you remove this metal cover. This one also uses Phillips head screws, but with 2 different sizes. 6 of the screws don't come out of the metal panel. Only the 4 smaller screws around the fan should come out. Then you can just lift the panel off. But it it might stick a little as it's covered in heat pads for the RAM, SSDs, and even Wi-Fi. With that removed, we've got the battery down the front, 2 memory slots above near the middle, installed SSD to the right of that, secondary M.2 storage slot on the left, with the Wi-Fi card just above. Wi-Fi was the fastest we've tested so far in the new house. We just moved, so I had to throw away my old data, as it wasn't measured in a comparable environment. Speeds from the installed 1TB PCIe Gen 5 SSD were super fast. You can configure it with a cheaper PCIe Gen 4 drive, but given the difference is like $20, honestly, I'd just spend the extra to get double speeds. Both M.2 slots fit drives with chips on both sides, but only the M.2 slot on the right supports faster Gen 5 speeds, while the spare one on the left is slower Gen 4. The upgrade score is about as good as we see from most 16-inch gaming laptops. It's easy enough to open, has 2 swappable memory sticks, 2 M.2 storage slots, changeable Wi-Fi, no problems. It is a few extra screws to get that metal plate off, but it's not the end of the world for how infrequently you'd upgrade. And besides, thermal pads on everything, especially the PCIe Gen 5 drive, will help remove heat. There are 2 front-facing speakers just below the screen, which are still available even with the lid closed, and more underneath on the left and right sides towards the front. I thought they sounded pretty good for a gaming laptop, clear enough with a good amount of bass, but there was noticeable wrist rest vibration even at half volume. The Latencymon results weren't great in our 5-minute idle test, worse compared to what we measured last year in any case. My Legion is powered by a 4-cell 80Wh battery, but it's also available with a higher 99Wh capacity, so expect a longer runtime with that one. The Legion Space software lets you enable adaptive refresh rate, which wasn't initially available when last year's Pro 7i launched. This allows the screen's refresh rate to automatically drop to 60Hz when you unplug the charger to save power, and it goes back up to 240Hz when you plug back in. You can also use the Function plus R shortcut to swap between those refresh rates at any time. You can also limit the battery's maximum charge level to 80% in the Vantage software to help the battery last longer, as keeping it fully charged all the time can degrade it. But this can't be enabled at the same time as rapid charge, and you can also make the battery charge slower overnight. Battery life wasn't too bad as far as powerful gaming laptops with Intel HX processors go, lasting about 18% longer compared to last year's version. Honestly, that difference seems like too much to be due to the processor difference alone, but I'm not sure what else has changed. It lost 35% of its battery charge while asleep for 24 hours. But this isn't a fair comparison with the other laptops, as it depends on the size of the laptop's battery. Well, it is a fair comparison with last year's model, as they both had 80Wh batteries, so the 2026 one was draining faster. Here's how much battery power was lost on average per hour, which is a fair comparison, and it's not a great result, but that seems to be the case with a number of the more powerful options that I've tested. Let's check out thermals next. The CPU and GPU are covered by a vapor chamber cooler, and it's got 3 fans. Air comes in through these holes on the bottom panel and gets exhausted out of the entire back, which is why there aren't any rear ports. But it does at least mean no hot air blowing on your mouse hand, as long as you're not hitting cables. The Legion Space software lets us swap between different performance modes, which from lowest to highest are quiet, balance, performance, and custom. Performance and custom modes automatically apply this overclock to the GPU to boost performance. You've got the option of using it in balance mode, but not quiet mode. In custom mode, you can either enable extreme mode or create your own profile to tweak power and temperature limits. We've tested custom in both the built-in extreme mode and with everything maxed out to see the difference. You can also go into the BIOS and enable CPU overclocking and optionally do some undervolting. And after enabling that, the CPU overclock option becomes available in the Legion Space software. But we haven't done any testing with that, as it's kinda pointless. worse. Overclocking results depend on the silicon lottery, aka luck. The power button stays on one of these colors so you can always know which performance mode you're in, and you can swap between them at any time with the Function plus Q shortcut. You can also adjust the brightness of the power button through the BIOS. The internal temperatures are fine at idle, slightly cooler than last year's model. The rest of the results are from combined CPU and GPU stress tests, which aim to represent a worst-case full-load scenario. But the temps generally run warmer than last year's model. Temperatures get higher in the higher performance modes, as you'd expect. Custom mode reaches thermal throttling on the processor, but we could of course limit the max temp to avoid this. It would just be at the expense of some performance. Personally, I prefer that it maxes out by default. If you're paranoid about high temps, you've got the choice to customize it. Anyway, using a basic stand was able to lower temperatures slightly, and the cooling pad didn't really change anything, at least in terms of temps. The stand and cooling pad did provide better cooling, but instead of temps going down, the amount of CPU power used went up, which means better performance. Best case, custom mode with everything maxed out runs the GPU just over 160 watts and the CPU at about 110, so about 5 watts more power on the CPU compared to last year's model. Maxing everything out, including the cooling pad, ended up taking power away from the GPU and giving it to the CPU, which happened last year too. More power results in higher clock speeds compared to last gen. The 290HX Plus clocked a little higher compared to the 275HX in last year's model, but the 290 is also using more power, so it's not a fair comparison. Either way, very high levels of performance here. Here's how an actual game performs with the different performance modes in use. The purple bars were tested with the screen's native resolution, while the bars in red showed DLSS upscaling on balanced to boost performance. There wasn't really a difference between custom mode set to extreme or maxing everything out, and performance mode wasn't far behind either. The CPU can use more power in a CPU-only workload like Cinebench, where the GPU is idle. Again, the difference between custom mode set to extreme or maxed out wasn't that big. Despite having Intel's fastest laptop processor, at the end of the day, the refreshed 290HX Plus is just a 275HX with a 100 MHz higher boost speed to the P and E cores. CPU performance depends more on how much power you can run through the chip, so it ends up within the margin of error difference to last year's model. The single core score is the highest we've ever recorded, but it's such a small difference that it really doesn't matter. Performance lowers if we unplug the charger and run on battery power, but it doesn't dip back quite as much as last year's version with the 275HX. Single core performance is basically the same on battery too, and I didn't find it slow while using it on battery power. As for keyboard temps, most laptops I test are in the low 30°C range on the keyboard at idle, but the Legion was above this in its center hotspot, though it barely felt slightly warm. It gets warmer with the stress test running, but the middle hotspot still only feels a bit warm and not uncomfortable. The higher performance mode was warmer, as it's using more power now to provide better performance. But the wrist rest and WASD areas still feel cool. The middle is on the warmer side, but not hot yet. Custom mode wasn't that different, whether we use the included extreme mode or manually max everything out. Worst case, the middle just feels a bit warm, but not hot. The hottest point is slightly warmer than last year's version, but the processor was using a little more power too. I'd call this a solid average. Not uncomfortable, but not as cool as some of the other laptops like ASUS's Scar 16. But hey, also not as hot as MSI's far more expensive and larger Titan 18. Let's listen to the fans. Although this year's Legion Pro 7i ran warmer than last year's version, it was almost 2 decibels quieter with both running in extreme mode. But decibels are logarithmic, so last year's model ends up being almost 14% louder in terms of perceived loudness to our ears, which is what the Sones value shows. Again, don't forget you can easily lower fan noise at the expense of some performance. For example, you could max the fans out in custom mode, but that's almost 9% louder than extreme mode. Or you could just run in performance mode, which is a great sweet spot. Extreme mode has a perceived loudness level 33% higher than performance, a massive difference. Yet the FPS in games is hardly any different, so performance mode is definitely the way to go unless you'll do whatever it takes to squeeze out every drop of performance. As for the screen, the Legion Pro 7i is using the exact same OLED panel model as last year, which means it looks great with vibrant colors, deep blacks, and above average brightness as far as OLED goes. We measured over 500 nits at full brightness, and it can get very dim for using in the dark too. It looks slightly brighter compared to last year's model, but honestly, this is well within the margin of error difference. Either way, 500 nits for an OLED is on the upper level of brightness levels we've measured so far. Running an OLED at higher brightness increases the concern for long-term burn-in, but the Vantage Space software does at least have some basic options to help mitigate that, though only the dark mode option was on by default. Other negatives of OLED panels include PWM flickering, which can give some people a headache after long use, and the glossy screen, which is more reflective and can be annoying if you're working in a bright environment. But as usual, OLED means amazing screen response time, and content on screen typically updates faster than half a millisecond. That's extremely fast, and technically, it's the fastest result we've ever measured. But again, all OLED panels are fast, and the results are within margin of error range. The refreshed Intel processor gives it an edge in the total system latency test, which is the amount of time between a mouse click and when a gunshot fire appears on screen in Counter-Strike 2. Still, around a millisecond faster than last year's model isn't anything crazy. I doubt competitive players would notice this gap. The Legion has advanced Optimus, allowing you to automatically get better FPS in games without a reboot. It's also got the classic mux switch, so that needs a reboot, and considering it doesn't change which GPU the ports connect to, there's no real point using it. G-Sync is available with Optimus off, but there's no adaptive sync with Optimus on. So put simply, play games with Optimus off for the highest FPS and a tear-free experience. There's a 1440p camera above the screen in the middle, but it does not have IR for Windows Hello Face or Lock, and this is how it sounds while typing on the keyboard. There's also a switch on the right to disconnect the camera. But how well does Lenovo's Pro 7i perform in games? We've tested it with these settings to find out. We saw chart-topping gaming performance in Alan Wake 2 at 1080p max settings, or less than a 4% boost compared to last year's Legion Pro 7i with the same GPU and basically the same processor. But clearly the extra 100MHz clock speed bump is helping. There's a similar 5% lead with this year's Legion at 1440p, and it's quite impressive that it's competing against their larger 18-inch model from last year, and that's the case at 4K too, with this year's Pro 7i once again providing the best FPS we've ever recorded in this game from a laptop. But it's not all wins for this year's Pro 7i. Last year's Legion 9 was notably better when it came to Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p. We consistently had strange results at 1440p. I'm not sure why, but the 1% low in particular was always behind the other 5090 laptops, and we triple-checked this result. It's by no means unplayable or anything, but I'm not sure why this game seems to have a problem at this resolution. Whatever was happening doesn't seem to be an issue at 4K, with the Pro 7i back on top in terms of average FPS. Of course, it's not actually that different compared to a bunch of other other 5090 laptops, but it's still nice to see that you don't have to go for a bigger 18-inch model to get the best performance. It's a similar deal in Black Myth Wukong, but the gap between last year's version is almost nothing, and at 4K some of the bigger 18-inch models were slightly ahead. But again, the difference is so minor you'd be unlikely to notice it while playing anyway. But I will note the Legion is generally a cheaper option out of these. Meanwhile, with ray tracing and DLSS upscaling enabled, this year's Pro 7i came first in all games at all resolutions, with the only weird thing being that Cyberpunk still saw worse 1% lows at 1440p for whatever reason. Here are the 3D Mark results. Content creator results were great too. The updated CPU gives it a little edge in Adobe Photoshop. Otherwise, it's pretty similar in DaVinci Resolve and Blender to other 5090 laptops. There's a lot more customization available through the BIOS compared to most other laptop brands, except for perhaps MSI, who just have an insane amount of options. We've got options for CPU overclocking, undervolting, and more. Linux support was good for the most part, but the speakers were quiet and barely audible. Pricing and availability will change over time, so check the link below the video for updates. And if the Legion has a good sale, we'll share it on our gaminglaptop.deals website. We update that daily to include the best deals, so check it out regularly to save money on your next gaming laptop. At the time of recording in early June, I can't actually find this configuration with the new processor available for sale yet. But honestly, given the 290HX Plus is barely any better than the 275HX, it's not worth spending much more for. We're looking at around $2,900 as the lowest price we've seen the 5090 configuration go on sale for. But prices have clearly trended up over the last few months. So then, is the Pro 7i worth considering if you can find it on the right sale? Let's quickly summarize the good and the bad to help you decide. Starting with the good, performance is top tier. The OLED screen looks great and is brighter than most others. Total system latency is super quick. The BIOS has more customization options than most other laptops. And there's plenty of customizable RGB lighting. As for the bad, there's still no Thunderbolt 5 or IR for Windows Hello Face Unlock. The 400-watt charger is huge, and the ports are closer to the front than I'd like, which means cables could get in the way of your mouse hand. Bottom line, this is the same Generation 10 chassis of the Pro 7i that came out last year, just with Intel's refreshed processor inside. It's not clear if the 290HX Plus is going to replace the 275HX, but if it does and it costs the same, then sure, we get a little performance boost for nothing. But if the 290HX Plus ends up costing more than the 275HX, honestly, for most people, just get the 275HX and save the money. Unless the 290 is only a little bit extra money, then might as well. At the end of the day, there's only a minor performance difference between them. The Pro 7i with last year's 275HX does seem to run a little cooler inside, but its fans were also a little louder, so regardless, the Pro 7i is still a great gaming laptop that I can easily recommend. At the right price, of course. Unfortunately, it does seem to have sales fairly regularly, at least compared to other top-end laptops. And you'll find the best prices on our gaminglaptop.deals website with that link below. You also don't have to spend RTX 5090 money to have a good time. See how the lower-priced 5080 model compares in this video next. It can still play pretty much any modern game without hurting your bank account quite as much as the 5090. So I'll see you in that one next.